Good evening. My name is Erin O'Toole, and I'm the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And I'm very happy to welcome you to this telephone town hall tonight that we're also having live on Facebook. Tonight, we're talking with people across Ontario, particularly in southwest Ontario, about the path to recovery and how Canada's Conservatives will secure the future. You'll have the chance to ask me any question that you're worried about for the future of Canada, and any question you might have on our plan, Canada's recovery plan, how Canada's Conservatives will get Canada's economy back on track in all sectors of the economy, including tourism and issues of facing manufacturing and auto in southwestern Ontario, and in all regions of the country. To ask me a question about our plan or anything on your mind, hit *3 on your phone now. The past year and a half has been extremely difficult for Canadians across the country. Families have lost loved ones and have seen the stress of lockdowns. Hard-working Canadians have lost their jobs. The cost of living is skyrocketing, and there's a lot of worries. Instead of focusing on tackling those issues, particularly some of the businesses holding on by a thread after lockdowns and restrictions, Justin Trudeau has called an election. That's Justin Trudeau's choice. And I really hope his decision to call an election in the fourth wave of a pandemic, when there's forest fires in British Columbia, when there's small businesses hurt, particularly in border communities like Niagara Falls, and when we see chaos in Afghanistan, this isn't the time for an election, and I hope it doesn't cost Canadians. I want to be clear about this. I don't think we should be having an election at this time. It's reckless. We should be tackling the fourth wave, tackling the issues facing our country. But Mr. Trudeau, like normal, is playing politics when he should be focused on the priorities of Canadians. He's focused on his narrow priorities. Fortunately, our Conservative team has been working for months to create a plan to secure the future for all Canadians, Canada's recovery plan. In fact, we're going to tackle some of the challenges facing Ontario's economy, some of the issues facing our healthcare system, facing frontline workers, facing families with strain, and the mental health crisis that is the epidemic within the pandemic. Canada's Conservatives will always stand up for hardworking Canadians and their families from coast to coast, and we're ready to lift this country back on its feet and get us headed in the right direction again. The top 5 elements, the 5 pillars of our plan are as follows. 1 million jobs created in the next year. We want to rebuild after the pandemic and get people to work. Second pillar, accountability. We're going to introduce tough, new anti-corruption laws to provide transparency and accountability in Ottawa. Our third pillar is mental health, to address those impacts of the pandemic with our Canadian Mental Health Action Plan. Our fourth pillar, building up our self-capacity, self-reliance as a country, domestic vaccine and critical item supply, to make sure we're ready for future pandemics and threats. And fifth, and most importantly, getting our finances back into order, securing the economy by balancing the federal budget over the course of the next decade. If you have a question about any of these pillars or anything in Canada's recovery plan, hit *3 and you'll be able to ask me live, or if you have a question on Facebook, put your question in the comments below. Really, this election will boil down to this. Who do you trust to secure your economic future? There may be 5 parties in this election, but there's only 2 choices. Canada's Conservatives and Canada's recovery plan, or more of the same with Mr. Trudeau, the NDP, the Greens, and the Bloc Québécois. Sometimes you can't tell them apart. I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight. As I said, please press *3 now if you have a question to ask me, Erin O'Toole, leader of Canada's Conservatives. Now, I'm fortunate to have one of our great candidates in Nepean here with me tonight, Matt Triemstra. We were just in his riding that he will make a great MP for earlier today to talk about housing. And today, Matt's going to moderate this virtual town hall. Over to you, Matt.
Perfect. It was great to have you out this morning, Erin. And as I said, I'm happy to moderate today. And I'm here really because I support Erin's vision for Canada, and I'm proud to be a part of his team. Maybe you don't know this, but Erin was raised in Bowmanville, Ontario, a community with middle-class values of hard work and helping your neighbor. He served our country in the Royal Canadian Air Force for 12 years, and he has proudly represented the riding of Durham in the House of Commons since 2012. Erin stands up for hardworking Canadians. He wants to work for you and make sure that all the generations to come, Canadians can grow up with world-class services, a healthy economy, and healthy finances. So the telephone town hall is officially about to start. So please remember, it's *3 to ask Erin a question. So again, if you have any questions during this, let's *3. So I think we're going to start with a conversation with Dan, and Dan wants to know why, what we are doing with healthcare in this country. So Dan, you're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
How are you?
Hi, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Good. Well, I think it's pretty common knowledge that our healthcare system is getting worse all the time, and it's something that I think concerns all Canadians, young, old, etc. And it's something that I'd like to ask what the Conservative Party is going to do about it, make it better.
Well, thanks, Dan. Certainly, access to world-class healthcare is critical, and it's a service that is fundamental, and Canadians want to make sure is there today and in the future. So what we're going to do as the federal partner here, because obviously the provinces have jurisdiction for healthcare, is be a partner that's reliable. So in Canada's recovery plan, in our plan, Dan, we've said that we will increase health transfers at a minimum of 6% and have a stable, predictable approach to those transfers and not tie the hands of the provinces. They want to tackle the needs of their system, and they're closer to the needs. So we're not going to put conditions set in Ottawa on how that increase each year is going to be set. And if we have stronger economic growth, because our recovery plan does have a massive focus on jobs and creating opportunity, that 6% will be the floor. We will increase it, but be responsible about making sure we're not making promises to our provincial partners that we can't keep. There's other aspects of overall healthcare in our plan, including the third pillar of our 5-pillar plan, which is mental health. We're going to also partner with on-the-ground nonprofit organizations helping folks struggling with issues in their community. We will enable them by helping them expand their service offering. We're going to partner with employers. We're also going to create a 988 suicide prevention hotline. Finally, we also have a real commitment to addiction and recovery. We've seen a spike, including in Niagara Falls and Windsor, of the opioid crisis. We need to act together, and we're going to have a commitment, a $325 million commitment to expand 1,000 recovery beds and 50 community centers to help tackle this. So Dan, we are so proud of our frontline health responders. We need to support them through a variety of means and be a key partner to ensure we have a world-class health system.
That's great. Well, next we're going to go to Marge, and Marge wants to know what the Conservatives are going to do about the Liberal plan taxing personal residences that the Liberals have been talking about. So Marge, you're on the line, and Marge, if you're there, did you know we were calling you tonight?
Yes. Thank you. Yes, you pretty well said what I was worried about. I believe that the Liberals are planning on taxing our principal residents, and I'd like to know the Conservative position on that.
Marge, it's pretty simple. We will fight that tooth and nail. In fact, that provision that people can build up equity in their home is often how most Canadians save for retirement. And exempting your primary resident from capital gains is a fundamental pillar to our middle class and to making sure that Canadians can secure a nest egg for retirement. We will fight tooth and nail. And what is very, very concerning about the Liberals, they have no plan to get spending under control. In fact, the nonpartisan parliamentary budget officer just said that the way the Liberals are going, they won't balance the books as things stand now until 2070. And the fact that the Liberals, through CRA and through CMHC, have been studying and tracking home values has a lot of people rightly concerned that their plan is not to support a steady approach to get our finances in order, not to get the economy roaring, they're going to tax people. And we've even seen some commentators close to the Liberal Party suggesting this should be done to relieve the housing crisis. Well, I was in Matt's riding today to say we're going to stop foreign buying of people that have no intention of living here, that are accelerating the housing crisis by just investing in Canadian homes. We're going to freeze that for 2 years. We're going to invest in and create policies that help accelerate the building of homes. So there's ways you can tackle the housing crisis, but still allow Canadians to keep that nest egg. So, Marge, a vote for the Conservatives will make sure that never happens. And it's something I hear regularly because people are worried about how the Liberals are going to start to deal with this massive debt they've run up.
Great. Well, why don't we go to Mike? Not quite a policy question, but maybe just trying to get to know you a bit better, Erin. Mike, you're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
Pleased to speak to you, sir. I have a question, and I got to tell you at the front, I'm a little jaded, like a lot of our voters. Politicians will say anything to get elected. We've heard it over and over and over again. And my simple question is, why should I better trust in what you say?
I appreciate you being frank with me, Mike. And I know why people are cynical. In fact, we had a question like this on a similar town hall just before this. People are tired of being told one thing and then seeing politicians do a completely different thing. You know, I used the example when I was Veterans Minister of the veteran pension issue, which Paul Martin changed as Prime Minister to a different structure for veterans. I never made a commitment that we were going to go back to the old system. I said, let's improve the system we have now. Let's work together and make improvements, particularly for mental health. Mr. Trudeau came in 2015. No, we're going back to the old pension system, told people whatever they wanted to hear. That's not leadership. Leadership, in my view, is actually going into the hall, and some Legion halls, as I did, and getting yelled at for a while. Because I'm there to try and build faith in where we're going together as a country. I'm not here to just tell you what you want to hear. So our plan is very well laid out. We're going to balance the books over the course of the decade because we want to upfront help people and get the economy back on its footing. And critical items like building capacity for Canada to be ready for crises in the future, working on mental health, is part of it. And our second pillar, Mike, which I talked a bit off the top, is accountability. We want to renew people's faith in public service by saying, if a politician breaks an ethical law, there's going to be consequences. And if you break them repeatedly, the consequences will be serious. We're going to have transparency in all lobbying to the government, because we saw friends of Mr. Trudeau lobbying to get out of criminal prosecutions with SNC Lavalin, and we remember Mr. Trudeau fired his Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who stood up to him. And we saw the same thing happen in the We Charity scandal, where people weren't even registering to say they were meeting with the government and they were asking for programs worth millions of dollars. So Canadians deserve to have full transparency. There needs to be accountability for misconduct. And this is where I think my background, I'm not a career politician. In fact, I've spent the least amount of time of my 3 careers in politics. I was 12 years in the military, 10 years in the private sector, and I've been 8 years in public life. And I think any other workplace, if you were repeatedly breaking the law and breaking the rules, the ethical rules of that workplace, as Mr. Trudeau has done in his, you'd be terminated. Well, Canadians have the chance to hand that pink slip on September 20th. And if they want accountability, it's in our plan.
Great. Well, why don't we focus maybe on your military background for a second? And I think we've got a great question here from Nina, who's just concerned with how our military is being treated and the allegations coming out. So, Nina, you're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. I'm very glad to ask you this question, especially since I've known now that you've been in the military. What do you plan on doing for all the sexual assaults that have gone on in the Canadian military? It cannot be political because it started becoming aware with the Conservatives. They did a study. Then the Liberals became in power. They did a study. Everybody seems to do studies, and nobody seems to do anything or implement anything. And these women are continued to be assaulted.
Great question, Nina, and I appreciate that question, both as a veteran myself, but more importantly as the father of young kids, including a daughter who's 15, that if she wanted to follow her dad's footsteps and go to military college or join the military, I want to know that she can make that decision not having to worry about a culture of misconduct or harassment, and certainly not have to worry that complaints about it would be covered up. I often say that women that want to step up to serve their country should be able to do that with our respect and in a culture that's free from intimidation, misconduct, or harassment. And that will be my plan, making sure we have an independent investigation process and a complaints process. And until we restore some faith in the Canadian Forces, which I care about a great deal. In many ways, when I joined the military at a high school, I was kind of a kid with a chip on my shoulder, and I learned to respect others. I learned to build teams. I learned to set goals. I learned to have a plan. We have a plan. And so I care deeply about the military and military families, and I've been really saddened to see the trust eroded. So I've said we need to put a freeze on promotions and salary increases to general officers until we can have this independent process in place. So that's my commitment. And Nina, you're right. There has been many studies. The Deschamps report that we had showed that there were problems that needed to be addressed. The military created Operation Honor, but the people that were running it were subject of complaints. And we had the Minister of Defense who knew for 3 years that a woman had complained to the Ombudsman, Mr. Trudeau's Chief of Staff, the Clerk of the Privy Council. Either Mr. Trudeau should have known or he actually did know. I'm not sure which is which, but either one is a failure of leadership. And I'll tell you, we will have a swift move to restore accountability, trust, and end this cycle of cover-ups. And Nina, as I said, this is something that's very important to me because I do think the Canadian Armed Forces are a very important federal institution and need to be the pinnacle of respect, inclusion, diversity, and a reflection of our country in 2020, 2021 and beyond. And so this will be a priority for me.
Great. Well, why don't we go in a different direction? And Erin, something that unites you and I, we have kids around the same age. I think we're both committed to leaving them with a healthier future. So Lori, you're on the line with Erin O'Toole, and Lori has a question about our plan to combat climate change.
Hi, Lori.
Hello. Hi, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Did you know we were going to call tonight, or did you just pick up and you were invited to the town hall?
I just got invited.
Perfect. What's your question?
Just not hearing anything about climate change. You're going to be spending a lot of money for creating new jobs and everything. Are these jobs going to be green jobs? Are you going to go along that lines?
Great question, Lori. And one of the challenges in COVID was it was hard to get our message out. I can tell you, sometimes opposition leader, when the Liberals didn't even show up in the House of Commons most day, I felt like the Maytag repairman, kind of waiting there for people to talk to me, even though in April we launched the most comprehensive climate change plan ever before an election. Because Conservatives, we have to win some trust back with people on this issue, and it's important. So our plan, Lori, which is in our policy document, but it was the one portion that we released in great detail months early, because we spent months working on it. It will meet our Paris targets, but we've come up with a plan to actually minimize the job and investment disruption that Mr. Trudeau's ever-increasing carbon tax is causing. We think there's huge opportunities in a range of areas for a lot of green jobs in some of the great technology we already have in carbon capture, utilization, and storage, small modular reactors, and some of our innovative investments in flow-through shares and first-mover technologies will actually allow us to really build up and scale up some sustainability type jobs and startups as well as green startups. So there's going to be a lot of job activity from our climate change plan. But Lori, it was important for me to say we have a plan that will meet our targets. We're pricing carbon, but we're proposing a solution that doesn't send tax dollars to Ottawa. It allows people to lower their carbon footprint themselves. So it's an innovative plan. We worked with a third-party consultant based out of Vancouver, a leading climate change consultancy, to make sure we could get the right balance, and also to show this isn't just Erin O'Toole proposing something out of the blue. We have costed it, modeled it so that we can get the emissions down to meet our Paris commitments, but get the country back to work. So Lori, go on our website. What I'm showing to the folks watching on Facebook is our hard copy, but you can download by PDF all elements, and our climate change plan, launched in April, is an important part of Canada's recovery plan.
Well, speaking of Canada's recovery plan, we've had a few questions. Erin's given us some great, straightforward answers, but we want to hear from you as well. So we want to know if you support Canada's recovery plan, press 1 on your phone. If you're choosing to go with a different party, press 2, and if you're just not sure yet, press 3. So we really want to hear from you. So again, the question, do you support Canada's recovery plan? We got another question here, and I think it's from Juanita Wiggle, and I get confused. I'm not sure how many ethical lapses this government has had, if it's 1, 2, or 3 ethics reports, but she has a question. So you're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
Hi, I have a concern about how Trudeau has managed to hide, just backpedal, whatever he could, so that information would not be forthcoming in committee, in any of the committees, and even to forbidding his people to attend. So I'm wondering, is it to be at all possible, when we win, to reopen those?
Well, thanks, Juanita, and I'm really glad. A lot of people that get the invitation for a telephone town hall and join, a lot of them are very politically engaged. They watch the committees. They know that there's been record filibustering. This came up on one of our previous calls. Some Liberal MPs like reading children's stories and other random things rather than answer any questions that our Parliament is meant to ask, whether it was on the pandemic, whether it was on the We Charity scandal, or lately, Juanita, questions about the Winnipeg lab, our top secret lab that clearly had a security breach. In one of the responses to one of my questions, Mr. Trudeau even used the word espionage. So there's a lot of questions about what went on. And when Parliament voted to disclose the documents, Justin Trudeau is taking Parliament to court. The Speaker is a Liberal, as you know, Matt. Right. And it's taking the Speaker, a Liberal MP, to stand up for the dignity of our democracy. It's unprecedented the levels Mr. Trudeau will go to keep that cycle of cover-up. So, Juanita, with respect to the Winnipeg lab situation, I'm intervening in the court case as opposition leader to make sure he can't use the courts to avoid scrutiny. And I pledged to release those documents with the right security provisions within the first 100 days of us forming a government. We also have, as our second pillar of Canada's recovery plan, very detailed transparency and accountability laws that I spoke about yesterday when I was in Quebec City. There will now be a fine, potentially a serious fine, for any violation of ethics laws. It used to be that it was, embarrassing or shameful to violate an ethics law. Mr. Trudeau violated several, and there's no accountability. So we're going to build in accountability. We're going to close loopholes in lobbying. We're not going to allow lobbying ever to happen to stop a criminal prosecution. That's the SNC-Lavalin situation. So we have to restore people's trust. As you said, a lot of people know that Mr. Trudeau has run a culture of entitlement and a culture of cover-up. I think Canadians deserve better than that.
Now, of course, we are going to an election, amidst a fourth wave of COVID, so it would be natural that there would be a lot of questions on that. So Carlana has a question about mandatory vaccine mandates. Carlana, are you there? You're on with Erin O'Toole.
Yes. So my name's Carlana, and I was wondering, what rights are you going to give to employees over their own bodies to make their own healthcare decisions regarding the fourth vaccinations while retaining their jobs and not going broke paying for almost daily testing?
Thanks for the question, Carlana. And this question has come up very early in the election because Mr. Trudeau, of course, is calling an election in the middle of the fourth wave, the start of a fourth wave. And then just before that, he put out this mandatory vaccine for federal employees and federally regulated. And let me say off the top, vaccines are a safe and effective tool. You know, my wife, Rebecca, and I had COVID. And to show people that it's safe and effective, we publicized our getting of the vaccines. And I've tried to talk about how they're the most important tool for us to turn the corner. But when it comes to personal health decisions, I want to respect Canadians and try and work to overcome any hesitancy or concerns, but never coerce someone when we can work with them with other tools to keep the public safe. So many provinces are getting past the 70% plus threshold, which starts building close to herd immunity, reducing the ability for spread somewhat. We need to make sure that we use daily rapid testing, that we use masking and social distancing as additional measures to keep people safe. Provinces will also make some decisions with respect to their jurisdiction and workplaces that they've had to restrict or close through the pandemic. I will always respect that, but that's how our approach will be on the federal front. We're trying to be balanced, put a priority on public health and safety, but also trying to have a balanced and a reasonable accommodation for some people that may not be vaccinated. Mr. Trudeau tried to turn this into a political issue. I don't think it should be. I think we should always talk about the importance of vaccines, but always try and make sure that we have ways to keep people safe using the other tools. The one thing we all know, and there's fatigue with COVID, Carlana, and I'm sure your family just as much as Matt's and mine, we all have collections of masks hanging off the fridge door or the cupboards in the kitchen. Years ago, when you'd see someone wearing a mask on the subway or a bus or something, you thought, oh, that's unusual. And now we're all in masks. We also now social distance. I'm elbow bumping people on the road, not shaking hands. Politicians used to kiss babies and shake hands. I'm not kissing any babies in this election. And I'm trying to do my part to make sure that I'm promoting public health. I'm doing my role in running a responsible campaign at a time I don't think we should be having a campaign. And Canadians want us to fight COVID together, not through division and not through using healthcare as a way to divide. I want to bring people together. Let's fight the pandemic and get the country back to work. That's what Canada's Recovery Plan is all about.
Great. Well, speaking of Canada's Recovery Plan, let's go back to our poll because we do want to hear from you. So if you agree with Canada's Recovery Plan, why don't you press 1 on your phone right now. If your vote is leading to somebody else, go ahead and put 2. And if you're still undecided, if you're still thinking it's early days in this campaign, go ahead and press 3. And again, that's do you support Canada's Recovery Plan? I think one of the key issues we've been talking about is affordability. And a lot of times we think about young people and buying a home, but what about on the other end? What about our seniors? And so we've got Robert on the line who just wants to know what we're going to do for seniors. So Robert, you're on with Erin O'Toole.
Yes, we're expected to live on $1,000 a month, where immigrants are getting a lot more than that. And last year I had to qualify for the CERB. And this year they took away the old age supplement. So I'm 74 years old and have to go back to work to try and make ends meet. With the inflation going up and food costs and everything going up of me. And I'd like to know if you've got any plans for us.
Thank you, Robert. And this is something, as Matt knows, we hear on the doorstep and we hear across the country. Just the pressures of inflation, of rising costs. It hits everyone, but especially people on fixed income. And so that's why Canada's Recovery Plan is about trying to help, trying to take some pressure off. And I want you to know our MPs brought up this impact of OAS on people that were on the CERB. We want to make sure we try and rectify some of these gaps in programs that came about as a result of COVID. And keeping up with the cost of living is huge. So seniors that are still in the workforce, and it seems like you're still partially in the workforce, Robert, we're going to have a $1 an hour raise to our workers' benefit. We're massively increasing that because we know we need to give more support there. We're going to help seniors stay in their own home as much as possible with home accessibility and a tax credit. We're also going to give families a credit, and we were talking about this earlier, that families that take in a parent and help provide care, we're going to give an incentive to those families to try and help give options. It takes a little bit of pressure off the long-term care system, which is going to be expanding and addressing gaps that came up. We're going to actually invest to partner with the provinces on long-term care. We're going to fix some of the gaps in pensions for bankruptcy, make sure that pensioners are protected and we don't see corporate insiders kind of raiding the funds when the pension's in a big liability position in bankruptcy. And we're going to increase the OAS in line with the planned increase. So there's a number of things we're doing, Robert, long term, but we're also in the short term trying to provide some immediate relief. Our GST holiday in December is a way we can kind of, as a country, end the year with a little bit of a break. That break will help people that are struggling at the end of the month with costs, but it'll also kickstart some consumer spending for our bricks and mortar businesses who are in trouble. So, Robert, my advice, check out Canada's recovery plan. We need to get the country moving again, and we need to make sure that we're helping some of the people that are falling behind.
Great. Why don't we go in a different direction here? And we've got Jim from St. Catharines. And Jim has a question about what we're going to do to ensure freedom of speech. So, Jim, you're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
Erin, thanks for taking my call. I'm a recovering lefty, like a 10-time candidate, and I joined your party to support a local candidate, but he got blocked. So I ended up softly fond of the PPC. I wonder, what are you going to do to ensure freedom of speech and fight against the censorship and media control of the Liberal government?
Well, thanks, Jim. A recovering lefty that's on a bit of a political journey. It seems like it. I have always said that in a democracy, you have to have a healthy debate and you have to defend freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and some of the fundamental freedoms in our society. And I learned at law school where some of my own views coming out of the military, transitioning to the reserves when I went to law school, being challenged. In law school, there's an expression, hear the other side. You have to promote an environment where people will be challenged to make sure that you can defend your point of view. That's a democracy, and we should be encouraging that on campus. And so I've said for a long time, we have to ensure that freedom of speech is part of our university setting. The University of Chicago has done some great work on some of the principles behind freedom of speech, and I think that should be part of our discourse because you have to have respect for other viewpoints. But if you're just in your own bubble, hearing the same viewpoint all the time, and that's happening on social media, it's happening in politics, Matt, we see it. How do you actually know you've got support for your point of view because you're never really being challenged? You're just reinforcing yourself, and we see way too much of that in politics. So that's one thing we're going to try and promote. We want to make sure the private sector media landscape survives this very difficult time for digital. So we've said we have to look at the mandate for CBC English television and digital. What's happening is the traditional media, especially the large newspapers, are losing market share to the web giants. They're not seeing people get the home delivery of papers, advertising's flowing. And as they're trying to commoditize the digital space, the federal government is competing with them. I don't think that's fair. We have to also recognize people are streaming, people are consuming media in new ways. So let's defend our content creators and balance the playing field with the US, with the big web giants, without eroding free speech. The fact that Mr. Trudeau thinks that social media accounts should be regulated by the CRTC or some body like that is quite frankly ridiculous. This is such an important part of our life these days, and political discourse. You can't start monitoring it and regulating it from Ottawa. So I think you can support our artists and content creators without eroding free speech. And so, Jim, you're on your political journey. I'm glad you took our invitation to join this town hall tonight. I'd ask you to check out Christina Waller, our candidate in St. Catharines. She is a fantastic candidate. She's hustling. She's helped, kids in difficulty around the world. She's principled. She's a volunteer. I think she'd make a great member of Parliament. The Liberal member of Parliament there right now really is only known as a bit of a personality on Twitter, doing whatever Justin Trudeau's office tells him to do. I think St. Catharines, I know a lot of great people there, deserve a lot better than that, Jim. So please give Christina your consideration.
Great. So let's go to, we haven't talked about energy and energy independence. So what is, we're going to Daryl. So Daryl, you're on the line. What's your question for Erin O'Toole?
Well, I've got, I guess, a two-part question. What is the Conservative Party's decision on the existing carbon taxes that are costing the average homeowner and businesses huge sums of money? And what are we going to do about the pipelines that are technically counterproductive to green energy? Instead of shipping on trains, we could start shipping through pipelines again and actually become energy independent instead of spending everything we've got on the wrong plan.
Well, Daryl, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked this, because out west, when I go to Alberta and Saskatchewan, they often wonder if folks in my province, in our province of Ontario, care about issues like energy independence and getting the best price possible for our resources. I think it's a travesty that we lose billions of dollars each year because we can't secure the best price for a finite resource. Once you sell it, and over the next few decades, there will be less use of hydrocarbons and other things. So we should not be allowing this finite resource to be squandered. And as you said, pipelines are the safest way to get our energy to market and to tidewater to global markets. I inspected pipeline. Before I joined the military, the first time I moved away from home and worked was inspecting pipeline through Ontario. Very safe, working for years. And there's been unfair attacks on how we can get our energy to market and get our emissions down. So we're going to have a very serious approach on this, Daryl, because Line 5, a pipeline that brings energy to Ontario, that is used by businesses across southwestern Ontario, that's used by Pearson Airport, that has thousands of jobs in the Sarnia area, that's at risk. And Mr. Trudeau lost Keystone XL twice under two different Democratic presidents, and it was the first thing that President Biden did. We've never seen, in my lifetime, worse Canada-U.S. relations than right now. Not the last president that Mr. Trudeau will always try and blame. Buy American is worse now. Softwood lumber, worse now. Agricultural policies of the U.S., worse now. Line 5 at risk now. All under President Biden. And Mr. Biden looks at Mr. Trudeau as being a weak partner with respect to Huawei and Chinese communist state-owned enterprises. So we need to realign with our allies. And I think we need energy independence on a Canada-U.S. basis so that we can secure that resource and not support Venezuela or Russia or other sources where energy is not environmentally sound. There's no respect for the rule of law, no respect for human rights, no respect for Indigenous peoples. Our energy does. So we're going to stand up for that sector, Daryl, and it's great. I wish some of my friends out west could hear the fact that here's someone in St. Catharines or southwestern Ontario that gets it. On the carbon tax, we've proposed an alternative to Mr. Trudeau's approach that is not a tax. It does have a price on carbon, and I've gotten some hits and slings and arrows for that. but I always said that I wanted to present a plan that would allow Canada to meet our commitments. I think it's important that we have a plan to meet our commitments, whether it's Paris, whether it's NATO. And so our plan, which is in Canada's recovery plan, can meet Paris targets, can get the energy sector working, focus on ESG leadership, environmental, social governance, and try and make this a conversation where people can see that Western success or Newfoundland success in energy is Canadian success. And after COVID, we need every cylinder in our engine firing, and that's what Canada's recovery plan will do.
Well, folks, we're getting to the end here, and I'm glad you all picked up the phone to join us. So we'll have time for a few more questions. There's so many pouring in here, but maybe for the last time, let's do our poll again. So I'm interested to know, for those of you on the line, if you support Canada's recovery plan, press 1 now. If you're still on the fence or voting for somebody else, press 2. And if you're undecided, vote for 3. And again, that's Canada's recovery plan. This next question from Trudy. Erin, what's the last page of our platform there?
We're sending the platform to the parliamentary budget officer to verify our internal costing, and then that will be edition number 2. We'll roll it off the presses, and by then this book will be worn out. I'm carrying it around, including to Nepean today.
Perfect.
But we'll have edition number 2 because it's flying off the shelves.
Great. Well, Trudy wants to know, how are we going to pay for some of our plans? Trudy, are you there? You're on with Erin O'Toole.
I'm here. Yeah. No. I mean, it all sounds great. I mean, great mental health, and it's going to be better for the environment. We're going to do all this stuff, but how exactly are we going to pay for it?
That's why we have the plan, Trudy. That's why we have the plan, because I tell you, we need a plan to make sure we can get our finances in order over the next decade, but tackle the challenges facing our country on mental health, on providing stable transfers for healthcare to the provinces. And the key thing actually builds off of Darryl's question. Mr. Trudeau, because of his anti-work agenda, not just energy, he was in southwestern Ontario. He was in London years ago mocking manufacturing. He said Ontario needs to move past manufacturing. So he doesn't support manufacturing, doesn't support energy, hasn't gotten a softwood lumber deal under 3 presidents, doesn't support the steel or aluminum sectors. We should have been aligned on policy with the U.S. against transshipment from China. He called small business owners tax cheats. Where does Mr. Trudeau think people are going to work? In, his foundation, the Trudeau Foundation or something? We need a private sector. We need businesses to get back on their feet, especially in southwestern Ontario. We need to see the fabrication and auto parts sector survive and thrive. We need to help the border communities, especially in Niagara Falls. Tony Baldinelli, our MP from the area and our candidate there, is my special lead on tourism recovery. Canada's recovery plan, the first pillar, our commitment, 1 million jobs, special programs for highly impacted sectors like tourism, like travel. That will be big for border communities. So Trudy, we want people to get back to work in all sectors and all regions. So we're the only party that supports the energy sector, that supports the pipelines Darryl just asked me about. We can also get our emissions down. You don't get your emissions down by shutting down a critical part of your economy. So we're going to get the country working. We're going to get expenditures down, but we've chosen a timeline that Trudy allows us to make some key investments in mental health, in addiction, because I want to make sure people are well and the country's doing well, and get our finances in control in a way that's compassionate and focused on work. Mr. Trudeau, the NDP and the other parties all want to turn the CERB into some basic income. That will hollow out our ability to have health care, to have old age security. We want to empower this country. And Trudy, it's on the web, and as soon as we have the PBO's report, you will see that update because we want to be accountable to you.
Well, we're almost at the end here, so why don't we finish this town hall how we started the day, Erin, and that's to talk about affordable housing. So we've got Julie on the line. So Julie, you're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
Hi, First, I just want to say thanks for your military service. Second of all, so what I'm wondering, I am in a wheelchair, and as such, I'm on ODSP. ODSP pays $479 towards housing costs. As you know, you cannot find one-bedroom apartments. If you try to apply for geared-to-income housing, it's an 11-year waiting list, minimum. And I've been separated, not because of COVID, but from my actual children and grandchildren. I had to move an hour away to get an acceptable housing unit that I could afford through affordable housing. I'm wondering what the Conservative Party intends to do on making people in my situation be able to live, afford to have an apartment, and not be separated from their families, which ultimately affects mental health.
Well, thank you, Julie, and thank you for sharing some of the personal circumstances you're facing. There are, I think it's 1 in 5 Canadians living with a disability. And we want, as part of our plan, to try and make sure our programs in the federal government are working. So you see, I'm referring to my plan a lot because we've thought about people in your situation, and we want to see how can the federal government help, Julie, and I can only imagine how hard it can be with disabilities, having that distance from family, and the pandemic has, I'm sure, been exceedingly hard on you. So I want you to know we're going to double the disability support in the Canada Workers Benefit. That's a major initiative as part of our plan to help folks that are often in the lower income brackets. We're going to remove the unfair penalties for people that are working on a part-time basis, sort of clawback that discourages people from having some level of work. We think, and I saw this in my work with veterans, there's a purpose element to wellness of being able to work, even if it's on a part-time, and we want to make sure work pays. We're going to enhance the accessibility fund, all specific for people with disabilities, and we're going to make it easier to qualify for the disability tax credit, something that the Liberal government changed, and CRA changed, and they didn't do anything about it, and a lot of people were not qualifying for that tax credit. On the housing piece wider, Julie, Southwestern Ontario, Southern Ontario is in a housing crisis. The country is. And nipping away at the margins with a 1% tax on foreign buyers, a plan for first-time buyers that most first-time buyers don't qualify for. Mr. Trudeau never puts forward serious ideas to tackle serious issues. Today I did. I was in Matt's riding in a lovely neighborhood with some families, and I talked about the importance of making sure that home ownership and rental housing is available to all Canadians. And so the federal government has a role. We have a plan to deliver 1 million units and houses in 3 years. Federal government will free up Crown land, 15%. We will change some of our approaches to mortgage terms. We will limit foreign buying and encourage foreign investment in purpose-built rental housing and bring some of the money in Canadian development into that area through some innovative policy. And we're going to make sure that CMHC and the mortgage stress test and a variety of policies allow people to qualify, particularly young people that are almost giving up on the idea of home ownership. So the big piece is supply. We have a role to play, including with density around transit. That's part of our program. So Julie, we're trying to put forward a number of ideas. Housing is also provincial and municipal, and getting that supply increased is an area we're going to have to work together, but we need an active team in Ottawa, not a prime minister that focuses on announcing things but never delivering.
Great. Believe it or not, Erin, I think we have to wrap up. It's been a privilege to hear some real answers, unlike question period, where we don't always get those answers. And so I just want to say thank you. We couldn't get to everyone's questions, but thank you to those that did call in and you picked up the phone tonight. So I just want to finish by saying thanks, Erin. Our Conservative team is ready to deliver Canada's recovery plan to stand up for hardworking Canadians and their families. And that's why I'm glad that you're specifically leading Canada's Conservatives in this election.
Well, thank you for being here, Matt. Thank you for hosting me in Nepean today. You've been a great host. The first time for us to do this together. Sadly, we're doing more Southwestern Ontario, so we're not even talking to Nepean. Sorry about that. But I'll tell you, Chris Lewis in Essex, Rob Flack in London West, Christina Waller in St. Catharines, Graham Speck in Niagara Centre, Tony Baldinelli, my lead on tourism recovery, Dan Muse in Flamborough-Clanbrook, Larry Brock, a former Crown attorney in Brantford-Brent. We've got an incredible team in some of the ridings. I saw some of the questions come in from that I want you to look at and consider as we have to build back from COVID-19. We need a plan, and we have Canada's recovery plan, a 5-point plan to kickstart our economic recovery, to get our country back on its feet, to help some of the people suffering, some of the folks that are falling behind under Mr. Trudeau, tackle inflation and rising costs and challenges like housing. We've talked a little bit about it. That's our commitment to you. Our team is ready. We have the plan. We have a leader who's experienced and has a track record of bringing people together. So thank you for inviting us into your kitchen, your home tonight. Thank you for holding me to account. I want to wish you and your family well. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those formats. But please check out Canada's Recovery Plan. We want to earn your vote. Let's use this election to secure the future for all Canadians. Thank you very much.